Warning, this show contains adult language. Welcome to another edition of Up and In It. I'm your host, Adrian Babashoff, and if you're new here, welcome as well. And if you're wondering what the show is about, it's entirely dedicated to improving quality of life for both people and planet through liberation and independence, moving you from surviving to thriving and living life on your own terms. I'm coming to you live from my 7.3-liter diesel pickup truck, heading out from my farm. And today is episode 276, and it's vegetable production from small to medium, part 2. And the background noise is my vehicle, so please pardon that. Let's get into it. I really want to talk about container gardening today. I want to bring that into food production because I think it's very important. I think it's something that we might want to take consideration in doing besides the traditional in-ground and raised beds and things like that, because there's many, many benefits, and that's what I want to share with you guys today. Many, many benefits. We can't even cram everything in here. I'm just trying to give you guys as many as I can, as quickly as possible, but as comfortably and explained as best as I can with the limited time I have. So let's talk about mobility as the very first thing. The container gardening, whether it's 5-gallon buckets or square foot gardening in containers like with square wood pellets, whatever you're doing, as long as they are in containers that are able to be lifted and moved around, these are completely mobile. And what I love about it is that if you ever had to move, right? If a lot of you people, I think, that are probably listening to this style of show, the interest, it's probably people that are renting houses and things like that. And guess what? You don't really have to till up the soil. These things could be as decorative or as just sloppy as a 5-gallon bucket. There's not much that you have to do with it, right? You can make them look pretty. If you've got a backyard where nobody can see in and you don't mind you're not into the aesthetics, but more of the functionality, then the 5-gallon buckets are just fine. I personally, coming from my farm where I'm driving from right now, I do square foot, a perfectly 1 square foot square container made out of wire baskets and burlap fabric. It's completely biodegradable, hence the biodegradable container gardening whenever I mention that. You can check that out at biodegradablecontainergardening.com, and there's also a Facebook group called San Diego BC Gardening. So feel free to join, and you can go poke around and see what I'm talking about with that. But yeah, the mobility, if you ever moved, the one thing I like about the mobility, I'll say, is where I have my farm right now, my garden project, I don't own the land, but I own the soil. So it doesn't matter if the people, sold the house, I had to move, something changed basically where the farm had to be relocated. My soil goes with me. I'll have the soil for probably about a decade, right? I can keep switching these things over and remixing it and utilizing the same soils that I've built. So the other things I love about container gardening is, for instance, right now I'm in a new experimental phase of what we're doing is we're actually placing our containers on top of wooden pellets. I'm lucky to be in the construction industry and roofing to be exact, and I'm able to acquire free, perfect 4x4 by 10-foot pellets. They're built very strong to hold lots of weight of roofing materials. So I can pick these up to my heart's content. They've got hundreds of them. And what I do is I prop these up on cinder blocks, and there's a lot to it that I can't fit in here. But basically I don't have to bend over anymore. And what I could do is I could build these cinder blocks perfectly to the height of even the top of the bucket, to where when I walk through my garden, all I have to do is reach my arms out and start gardening, right? So if you're handicapped, you're getting older like me, or just simply, you work really hard, you're tired, you don't want to be bent over, right? Yeah, you don't have to do that anymore. There's also a little secret that you can do is line some axle grease to a certain point wherever the cinder blocks touches the pellet, and ants, slugs, pincher bugs, and things like that will not want to get to your containers. They will be they'll be outsiders. They can't get in. So a lot of different ways of utilizing this. One of the best things I have next on my list here is way less weeding. Now, it's not zero weeding, especially if you use compost that's been mixed in the ground and things like that, or worm castings like I use. There's a certain amount of seeds that are going to blow in and be mixed in from the soil. A lot of you guys that maybe don't understand is like in a tablespoon of soil, depending on where you get it, there could be hundreds of seeds in there just waiting to germinate. So you're going to have stuff popping out, but not like you would in the ground, not like you would in a raised bed, especially if you got these things up on a pallet. It's way less likely that you're going to have seeds blowing, hundreds of seeds blowing in, crabgrass and things like that. I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with crabgrass, but once it gets in the garden, it's just got these tentacles, and it's difficult to get rid of. It just looks at your garden and was like, oh, that's pretty nice. Oh, you got some yummy soil. I'm going to occupy the entire thing. Yeah, it's insane. So very difficult to get rid of. So if you're in an area like that, container gardening will definitely it'll make your life easier on so much. Let's move forward on the next one. Less animal intrusion. So I've heard, but I have not experienced this, that chickens, ducks, things like that, animals, mostly poultry, are have a less tendency to jump up onto containers, and even I guess some raised beds. You can put a little chicken wire around them if you're doing raised beds. But what I like about containers is you can move these away from pets. You can build yourself a little tiny, like a chicken coop that houses plants instead of chickens, right? You can build yourself a little aviary. It's kind of like what I've done on a large scale on parts of my farm. And what's nice about the aviary, as far as live animals and stuff like that, is that you can completely get rid of insects as well. Not completely, but you can get out this stuff called agricultural cloth, bug cloth. It's like pantyhose, and you can surround your entire chicken coop, your structure, or your hoop houses with this stuff, and really, really minimize grasshoppers and other insects and stuff like that. I forgot to mention too, gophers and moles, those are a really big problem, squirrels. So building yourself a little hoop house or an aviary, basically a chicken coop with chicken wire, is actually going to keep a lot of the birds out. It's going to keep a lot of the squirrels, the rabbits and stuff out of your garden. And you don't really have to worry about moles and gophers and stuff like that actually coming underneath and climbing over walls into your container gardens, because they just don't, for some reason, they're just not that intelligent enough to try to do so. So really, it lessens the load with having animals coming in to eat your food. So yeah, we talked about soil and things like that on the last show. The next thing is you have to put something in, the soil into something. So yeah, I'm really looking at just the convenience. Even if you own land, you really want to consider container gardening, because it's just so much easier on so many levels. Now, next note I have is multiple configurations. Now, I find sometimes, depending on the length, I'm 6'4". I've noticed some shorter people, right? They have shorter arms, like little pterodactyl arms. If you're a pterodactyl or Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it feels uncomfortable to reach very far, you may want to do a 3 by 3 foot garden, right? A 3 foot wide. I feel comfortable doing a 4 foot wide garden, especially when it's suspended up in the air. I can reach directly over me, and I can very easily reach over to 2 feet. So multiple configurations. You can try 4 feet if you can cram a heck of a lot more of plants on there, but if it becomes annoying to you and it hurts your back and you can't really reach out and it's difficult to weed, you can always reconfigure things. So the difference I look at is if you built yourself a raised bed or an in-ground garden and things like that, or you tilled up the soil, you kind of messed, there's no going backwards. What's done is done, unless you deconstruct everything. Whereas the container gardening is like a Jenga puzzle. You can just move stuff around, and this is going to give the mobility of this thing and the configuration freedom helps with a lot of stuff. We'll get into that too. I'm going to move next to the time saving. That's like the biggest one, I think, for me, is that I want to grow my own food simply for the flavor and the nutritional value, but I work a lot, right? Not right now. For me, this is the last week of September of 2021. I've got to get back to work. My mini retirement's done, and I got to go make some cash. And I can't be driving over to my farm every single day. And even when I'm home, I've got a lot of things to do. I'm a single father, special needs kid. I've got to prepare meals and shower and bathe and brush the kids' teeth and all these kind of things. So I'm very busy, and I'm sure you are too. But even if I wasn't, it's really nice to just be able to save a lot of time. And all of these things, this list that we're talking about as far as pests and animals. I don't even think I put water on here, but you can make yourself a adjustable automated watering system with a series of tubings that can come out. And again, if you put a valve on each one of them, which they're these little tiny valves in a 1/4-inch plastic pipes, you can literally shut off a whole series, or you can shut one by one off as you add them in. You know, it's like a bunch of tentacles coming out that you can insert into your containers. So as far as time, less weeding, less animals, less pests, and you wouldn't even have to really water. You just have to come and inspect every once in a while. In my opinion, too, it's a lot less money, I would say, because of the waste of the plants that you're going to lose when they're in the ground. It's kind of, you know, now that I have this note out there, it is cheaper to do stuff in ground, but the amount of water, especially resources like here in Sunnyside, California, where I live, water is pretty expensive. So I think for the container gardening and mixing your own soils is a heck of a lot cheaper, because you'd have to think about it this way. Your soil's like a sponge. And what we can do is you can actually take, if you bought yourself, say about, I don't know, 12 sponges, right? And you wet the one in the center. And you put a bunch of other dry sponges, dishwashing sponges, right? What's going to happen is that the dry sponges are going to leach all that water out really quickly out of just that center. That's what's happening with your garden. And when you put it in the soil, is you have the dry earth around it just literally sucking the moisture out. So you're saving a hell of a lot more money by having stuff in containers. You can build windbreaks and things like that. And if you do a high soil retentive, moisture retentive soil, which is a pretty penny in the beginning, but the amount of savings and weeds and things you don't have to do, time and money, actually outweighs it by far, in my experience anyways. The other thing that we're doing is we're repairing the soil's microbiology. If you do container gardening, whether it's 5-gallon buckets or the burlap sacks like I'm doing, or grow bags like they have that are woven out of, like, say, recycled jeans, and I think they use recycled plastic water bottles, and they weave this into like a fabric, and they actually have containers that you can plant in. And all of these things either leach water out, or you drill holes inside of a container, no matter what you're doing, whether it's clay pot or what. There's moisture that's escaping out the bottom. It needs to, otherwise the thing would fill up and you get some anaerobic dirty action in there. So what's happening if you place these on the ground or even above the ground, and you do something like I'm doing, where you put a bunch of wood mulch down at the bottom to suppress weeds, so that's even that much less work that you got to do. All of that yumminess, that compost or worm castings, all the nutrients and things you're putting is dripping, all the excess. Hopefully, that's why I like automated water systems, is that you can get it directly, where you just get a couple of drips here and there. But what happens is sooner or later, some of that stuff's going to get rained on, and you're going to lose some moisture. And basically what it is like a compost tea, like a worm tea. That's falling on top of the wood chips. The wood chips are letting the water pass through them, and they're also blocking out the sun, so that, guess what? You got nutrients hitting in the soil, and the wood chips are breaking down, creating food for the microbiology, and actually creating soil, and you're actually repairing the earth underneath whatever you're doing. So quickly, because I don't have a lot of time today, is that if you got yourself, say, a 3 by 10 foot garden, and you built, say, this pallet I'm talking about, where you got a 4-foot pallet, and you can fit, if you're doing rows of 3, you can fit probably about 27. All the drippings that are going to happen over the years are going to accumulate in time, and you're going to have worms underneath that bed that you're working on. All that excess moisture and nutrients that are going through are actually preparing very slowly a garden bed of rich nutrients for you in years to come. So you're actually repairing the earth while you're growing food, and you're going to be able to grow food in that area if you ever decided to go in ground. And it's just a win-win situation, and stacking functions. I like to call this my own little addition to permaculture. As far as, I call this a soil tractor. You can imagine if you kept moving this pallet around, you'd be repairing the, every couple of years, the area you left is actually better the way you found it. So we talked about mobility, and also the multiple configurations, the freedom of moving stuff around. So one of the cool things that I look at is that you can start growing your own seeds. Now here's why you'd want to have multiple configurations and mobility in a container system as far as for growing seeds for the future for yourself, is that when you have the same species, whether it's a tomato, a cucumber, brassicas, which are the cabbage family. So if you had Napa cabbage and regular, a head of cabbage, regular American cabbage, I guess you could call it, a head, the two would cross-pollinate because of the bees going from one flower of the plant, spreading it to the next plant. And what you get is a cross-pollination, and now you don't get a true seed. But if one was to take the Napa cabbage, the two different species of cabbage, and separate them and put one on the far end of the garden and one on the other far end, there's still a chance you might get a cross-pollination, but very highly unlikely. You can do such things as take them to other people's homes, separate them by a few miles. You could even wrap these things once they get pollinated, or you can pollinate them themselves. Put them in that pantyhose enclosure that you got so bees can't get in now, and let that thing just sit and go to seed. So it's very powerful as far as seed saving. You can do multiple things. Landrace significance I have on here is, well, let's skip that one. Landrace is basically breeding seeds to your biome, and I think that could be a show in and of itself. I don't know why I've inserted that one here. But the next one that follows up very nicely is a sick and recovery area. So what we have is an area where, let's just say you get powdery mildew, or let's just say you get an infestation of aphids, and if you're staying on top of it, what's going to happen is that you're going to be able to clip the leaves off of your sick plants that are infested plants, and you're able to move these away, right? Throw the leaves away, move those plants to another area, especially in the case of powdery mildew. That way it gives you time to clean it all up, and so that these spores or the aphids possibly won't spread on your other plants. Now the last note I have on here is the decoy effect. And the decoy effect is that you can literally plant stuff that the aphids would like more than other things. For instance, brassicas, for some reason, the excuse me, the aphids love like kale. They like, especially kale is probably the best one. Kale, it's like a magnet to them. So what you can do if you're planting cabbage and things like that is find out which species are less prone to getting aphids. And what you could do is plant, say, things like a kale plant right next to your kale, I'm sorry, or your cabbage, or you can plant a whole shit ton of kale on the whole other side of your garden, and it is highly likely that the aphids are going to go and they're going to attack the kale before they'd get your cabbage over in the area, or vice versa, right? So in any case, you're able to move things around and introduce new things. You could also do pollinators. You can create marigolds and things like that. One of the things I think container gardening has an advantage above growing stuff in the ground is that, like these pollinating plants, is for instance, maybe you might plant some marigolds and you've got a tomato bush. Next thing you know, your marigolds are dying out. In order to to replace them, you've got to rip them out of the ground or just cut them in the ground. Now you got this root ball in the way, and you have to disturb the soil basically. When it comes to container gardening, you can literally plant yourself a small container and you can grow, say, something like marigolds or any kind of insect attractant plant. And what you can do is you can actually move that once it's done, place them right next to the plants that you want pollinated, and then you're done, right? You can pull that one out, remix your soil, and plant everything right again as you go. So guys, that's the show. You guys know what to do. All the description is down at the bottom. Comment, let me know what you guys want to hear, how I'm doing for you. And as I always say, go out there and have yourself a near-life experience. Don't lose your muchness. Carry on the fire. Human up. Live it, love it, own it, and bone it, my friends.